Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to have a look at the rest of the airplanes that were passed to developers in December of 2024. There is a bunch of pretty fun ones, and we even have a North Korean plane which was passed to the devs, which is really cool, so very much looking forward to going through it. As always, if there is a specific aircraft you want to have a look at, there will be timestamps for the video, and if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and of course subscribe. Let's get into it. The first vehicle is for China, and it is the Shenyang J11B Block 02. The PLAAF initially had concerns about importing a large number of foreign frontline fighters due to the reliance on backup support for spare parts. However, when the Chengdu J10 faced difficulties with its engine, it became clear that using the same engine for both types would be beneficial, but this increased reliance on the Russian AL-31 engines. To reduce dependence on Russia, the PLAAF planned to replace the AL-31F and most of the original avionics with modern components that would allow the use of Chinese missiles. The goal was to manufacture the aircraft with indigenous components, some of which were redesigned. The development of the Shenyang Liming WS-10A Taihang engine was a logical choice to increase commonality between China's two premier fighters. A WS-10 prototype was successfully tested in 2002, replacing one of the AL-31Fs. The first flight with two WS-10 engines in a J11 was achieved in 2003 or 2004. The J11B prototype also flew for the first time in 2002, and the J118 flight testing was completed a year and a half later. 3 J11B prototypes were built, each with a slightly different configuration, and not all of them were powered by the WS-10A. The most significant changes included a new Chinese radar and an updated glass cockpit. In order to maintain the center of gravity, a unique counterweight had to be positioned in the front fuselage. The radar cross-section, or RCS, was reduced to approximately 25% of the Su-27's RCS by applying RAM coatings in different areas. Externally, the most noticeable change was the addition of a black radome and extended wingtip pylons, which were necessary to accommodate the longer tailspan of the PL-8 missiles. The Chinese government officially acknowledged the existence of the J11B in May of 2007, and the first batch of production aircraft became operational towards the end of 2007. But due to issues with the engine's quality and also reliability, the first airplanes were quickly taken out of service. As a result, the subsequent batches were equipped with the original Russian AL-31F engine. However, by late 2009, the problems with the WS-10 engine were resolved, and all aircraft from the second production block onwards were fitted with the improved WS-10A engine. This vehicle had access to a 30mm autocannon, 6 or maybe even 8 PL-12s, 6 PL-8Bs, and also access to bombs, which is quite fun. One of the J11B prototypes also had a mount for a dual PL-12 setup under the air intakes, which is pretty cool as well. For Italy, we actually have a really cool propeller aircraft. This is the Fiat G.59-4A. The Fiat G59 was an Italian post-war fighter derived from the already existing G55, which was made by the Italian company Fiat. After the Second World War, the Italian Air Force asked Fiat to develop a new fighter based on the glorious World War II fighter, and so Fiat started to study which engine could fit the G55 body in order to satisfy the Air Force request. Initially, Fiat studied using the Esotta Fraccini Delta RC40, but the idea was scrapped, and the Rolls-Royce Merlin was selected. The first prototype, made in 1948, was a twin-seat G55 with a Merlin engine from one of the P-51s of the Italian Air Force. The ITAF was satisfied with the new aircraft and proceeded to place an initial order for 30 units. The first version, equipped with the Merlin 500-200, was designated as the G59-1A-G59-1B and entered service in 1950. It was mainly used to train new pilots for jet aircraft. The second version, which was designated the G59-2B, was a twin-seat version made for training, with 19 units being produced after 1950. The first armed version was the third one, which was the G59-A/2. This version, originally developed to satisfy an order emitted by the Syrian Air Force, was equipped with 4 20mm Hispano-Suiza 20mm autocannons and 2 pylons for bombs and also fuel tanks. There was a total of 30 units of this version produced, 26 were bought by the Syrian Air Force, and the remaining vehicles were bought by the Italian Air Force. Later, one was bought by Argentina for test purposes, but the most produced version was the last one, the G.59-4A/4B. This version was made in a single and also two-seat version, with one of the main notable differences being the canopy. Compared to the previous versions, which had the standard G55 canopy, the A4 had a bubble canopy. A total of 40 of these units were made, and all entered service into the Italian Air Force in the last months of 1951. Those were used as trainers, and then were replaced in the early 1970s by the MB326. This version specifically, though, could be armed with the 4 20mm loadouts, bombs, and fuel tanks too. For France, we have a Breguet aircraft, the BR-1001 Taon. The Taon was born when US officials, enthusiasts after seeing the fallen Midge, got the idea to make a NATO competition to design a cheap, light fighter that could make short takeoffs and also be easily repaired and also maintained. It would be armed with 4 12.7mm machine guns and would be able to carry bombs and also rockets. Several well-known designs were submitted for this competition, and in the end, there were 3 finalists that remained: the Fiat G91, the Étendard, and also the Breguet Taon, which placed first. The irony being, the man who started it all, Holland, had its aircraft, the Gnat, eliminated because of its exclusive interceptor role. The Taon was a wonder at the time, benefiting from exceptional performance thanks to an advanced design favoring high lift, and it was able to retain speed and maneuverability despite a hefty fuselage and a reduced airfoil. Equipped with an Orpheus engine, it was overhauled during the trials in order to benefit from post-combustion, and it managed to break several times its own world record for sustained speed of 1,000 km an hour. Its overall lightweight allowed it a great autonomy, agility, and also speed, and proposed a multitude of unique innovations in aerodynamics and aircraft manufacturing that would benefit the French industry in the following years. Nevertheless, though, the aircraft lost the competition to the Fiat G91, not so much because it was an inferior design, but because the US officials had already declared the G91 the victor before the end of the competition. Its design would nevertheless be improved, then used for the elaboration of a future Anglo-French project known as the Seppercat Jaguar. The prototype itself, though, ended up in a museum. This vehicle is very beautiful. It's a lovely little vehicle and part of a set of vehicles that I would love to see in the game, alongside stuff like the Fallen Gnat. For Sweden, we have the J33. The J33 is a Swedish night fighter that was used extensively by the Swedish Air Force during the 1950s and early 1960s. It is an export variant of the de Havilland Venom NF2 and also NF2A, designated as the de Havilland Venom NF51. The Swedish Air Force initially had the J30 Mosquito as their primary night fighter, with the original plan being to replace it with a more advanced J32B Lansen in the mid-1950s. However, the J30 Mosquito was taken out of service much faster than intended due to several fatal accidents between 1949 and 50, which killed 12 pilots and highlighted the aircraft's age. This prompted the Swedish Air Force to search for a replacement for the J30, as production of the J32B had not begun yet. To solve this issue, the Swedish Air Force, already familiar with the J28 Vampire, began exploring the possibility of acquiring the two-seater DH-112 Venom night fighter variants, the NF2 and the NF2A. With approval from the Royal Swedish Air Force Material Administration, which was later amalgamated into the Swedish Defence Material Administration, An agreement was signed in January of 1951 for the delivery of 35 aircraft, and in June a second agreement was signed for an additional 25. In total, 60 aircraft were ordered, and those exported to Sweden were designated as the NF-51. Once they arrived to Sweden, they received the Swedish designation of J33. However, of the 60 ordered Venoms, only 59 came to Sweden. One of the aircraft crashed on takeoff from Havilland Airport in Great Britain, with both the pilot and also the navigator killed. The rest arrived safely and was subsequently incorporated to F1, with the first J33 Venom entering service in 1952 and then completely replacing the J30 Mosquito by November of 1954. The Venom continued to be in Swedish service through the 1950s and were a complete success compared to their predecessors. For Israel, we have a P-51D. This one specifically is the 2305 Mustang. Now, this one is different from the other P-51Ds because it drops its 50 cals and actually has access to 20mm, which is pretty fun, so we'll pick up the story there. On the 29th of September 1949, the IAF laid out a series of development requirements for its engineering department to test the potential feasibility of improved armament options for the aircraft that were in the IAF inventory at the time. One of these development requirements resulted in the Israeli Spitfire's unique air-to-ground rocket setup, but there was also a requirement to test the potential installation of 420mm cannons on a P-51D Mustang's wings instead of the 650 caliber machine guns. In order to do this, the IAF used Mustang 2305 as the testbed and turned to Fokker, the Dutch aviation company, to help with the design of the installation of the 20mm cannons. The modification was completed and tested by June of 1950, however it was decided to abandon the rearmament project soon after, and so Mustang 2305 remained the only Mustang carrying these guns in the IAF. It isn't specified in any source that has been found what these 20mm are, but it is seen as they were probably the Hispano Mark II cannons, since that's what the Israelis had access to at the time. The Mustang 2305 continued to serve with the 101st Squadron even after its modification as a standard fighter aircraft, though it was noted that the ground crews hated the aircraft due to the trouble the unique armament gave them when tending to it. It isn't known if Mustang 2305 participated in any combat sorties. However, there were several air patrol missions and low-intensity combat sorties that P-51s of the 101st Squadron took part in from 1950 to 1953, and that Mustang 2305 could have potentially been used in. Regardless of whether it ended up being used in combat or not, on the 16th of June 1953, Mustang 2305 met its end when it performed a crash landing during a training sortie. The pilot of the crash, Adam Sivoni, testified that the reason for the crash was that the engine idled after the second pass he and his wingman did during the sortie. He reported this had happened in the comms and directed his aircraft for a belly landing in Wadi Hayyan, where he managed to land the aircraft relatively intact with the canopy thrown off and damage to the propeller. Despite this, because of the remoteness of the location and also lack of capable means to transport the damaged aircraft out of the river valley, it was decided to strip the aircraft of all its useful parts and armaments and leave the rest of the frame. Over time, people who passed through the area, such as nomadic Bedouin Arabs, took metal scraps from the aircraft, leaving behind only scattered pieces. There are likely no remains of the aircraft left in the area today. And then we have something kind of interesting. A North Korean designed aircraft. The Korean People's Air Force was founded in August of 1947 and was initially equipped with Japanese and Soviet planes from the Second World War, which were used during the Korean War alongside some early jets, such as MiG-15s and also MiG-15 Bisses later into the conflict. In the following decades, the DPRK obtained steady deliveries of jets from both China and also the Soviet Union. At some point in the early 70s, the DPRK developed a homegrown ground attack aircraft. This was seen rarely in military footage and was only produced in small numbers. It appears to have been retired very quickly, as it was totally outclassed by pretty much all other aircraft at the time. Its name is unknown, and basically everything about it is only known from that footage. The aircraft is visibly very similar to both the Yak-18 and the IL-10, more so the latter. It has a redesigned cockpit, a taller tail, a new rear gun, and overall a longer silhouette, and its wings appear to be more reminiscent of the Yak-18. The aircraft has virtually the same weaponry as the IL-10. On either wing it has the Shikas 7.62mm and a VYA 23mm cannon. These are very common guns across planes in the Soviet tech tree that we already have in War Thunder, and generally has quite a lot of power. It seems to also be capable of carrying at least 2 100-kilo bombs, but it was never seen with any other weaponry, despite, of course, the IL-10 being able to carry multiple other things. The authors of the Armed Forces of North Korea on the Path of Songgun claim that the plane has the same engine as the Yak-18 or the CJ-6, which would provide a pitiful 260 horsepower. This would make this plane very sluggish unless its weight was reduced drastically to be more in line with the Yak-18 than the IL-10. So this is just one of those weird and wonky vehicles that would be really cool to see in War Thunder, but also at the same time probably wouldn't be very good. And at the end of the day, sometimes that just has to happen. The only question is, what tech tree do you put it in? As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.